Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another spectacular edition of the Court Martial Podcast. I am your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. We have a lot to talk about today. We've got tag team wrestling. We have another tribute. I can't believe how many tributes we've had to do this year, but we have another wrestling tribute. But we're going to get into some depth with that one, but we'll get to him in a minute because he's a guy that's not without his piece of controversy, and I want to talk a little bit about it. But before we get there, I have to punch somebody into the show. And that man is the one, the only, the Bay Area Brawler, Skyler Greenberg. Have to get him on, so give me 1 second. Now, I didn't tell him that I was going to start the live stream before I added him on. But my assumption is he's already watching, so he probably already knows that we're already on the air. But in any case, I'm going to give him a call and make sure he knows straight up what's going on. So let's get this going. By the way, I really hope that I have my hello, sir. And he can't be heard. Well, that's awkward. There he is. There he is. All right. Now, for those of you who do not know what that is referencing, there's a link in the description of the Survivor Series review that we did yesterday, actually, released today. And you will be able to check that out, the official review of all of mine, Skyler's, and Josh Agedden's thoughts. Josh Agedden, of course, a guest on this show repeatedly. And Sky, how you doing, man?
I'm trying to cook the turkey and my fire just went off. Damn it.
Trying to cut the turkey. All we're trying to do is cut the turkey.
Well, right now I'm making the stuffing, so.
I see. So you're having a post-Thanksgiving Thanksgiving.
Yes, because we bought 2 turkeys when we really should have just bought 1.
I hear you. You know, it's funny because I was actually in a similar situation because we actually had a family friend of ours come and bring us a turkey dinner, even though we had already bought all the materials necessary to make the whole Thanksgiving dinner, but she brought one anyway. So she brought one to us. So we were like, on Thanksgiving, we're like, all right, well, we already have this dinner, so let's just eat this. But we still have all of the materials necessary to make Thanksgiving. So inevitably, we're going to have to probably do the same thing. But in any case, we are here to talk about wrestling and turkeys that don't involve the gobbledygooker and don't involve that weird turkey suit that Impact does every Thanksgiving, which I don't understand how that became a tradition.
Because Impact is run by Vince Russo.
Well, and also, you know, the turkey suit wouldn't have been a bad idea as a means of humiliation, but then, like, people like Grado wore it as a means of pride, and then it lost all of its significance. So, Impact, ladies and gentlemen. Kenny Omega's on it now, apparently. But
anything Russo touches.
Well, speaking of Russo, before we get into the meat of the matter, which is tag team wrestling, I'm going to do something I never do. And I want to talk current news in the pro wrestling world, which is something that we have really never done here at the Court Martial Podcast. But in order to fully explain, I want to talk specifically about cross-brand promotion or potential for cross-brand promotion. So we've heard AEW and their Winter is Coming that they actually paid a grotesque amount of money to use the rights for, made Kenny Omega, the world champion after beating Jon Moxley, which, say what you want either way about Kenny Omega or Jon Moxley. It's really potato to me, or about Kenny Omega. But apparently Don Callis helped Kenny win, and then Kenny went into the vehicle, and Don Callis said he'll explain his actions on Tuesday, referring to Tuesday on Impact. And then AEW has confirmed this. So what that means is that we're getting very early into AEW's career, a strong collaboration, which is in its roots between Impact and AEW. So I don't know what to make of this, because there's been a lot of cross-branded promotional deals that have happened in history. I mean, a lot of them in the territory days and things along those lines, but more specifically getting to like the work recently that Lucha Underground and really Impact has been a big facilitator of that. You know, they had the Global Force and Impact. They had the not Ring of Honor. They had Lucha Underground and Impact, and now doing an AEW and Impact. And I just don't know how to feel about this guy. Do you think that this really is gonna? What do you think the repercussions of this are going to be long term?
It's too early to tell because this just started. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. It really depends on how they want to play this and how they want to set this up.
Yeah.
Like, if they are trying to do an invasion style angle, I have no interest whatsoever.
Yeah, not me either. I think it's overdone.
Right. If they're trying to present this as, hey, now Impact Wrestling affiliated talents can appear on AEW, it would be interesting to see who would come, because there are some really good talents on Impact who don't necessarily get the opportunity to show off what they can do because they wrestle for Impact.
Right.
And they would get much more exposure at AEW. Kind of similar to how the territory used to do their thing of, hey, I have someone I want to promote, but I don't have an audience for him. Why can't I send him to you and you show him, and when he comes back, he'll be an even bigger star for me?
I want to believe and have the faith that it is just going to be nice and healthy like that. There will be some people who appear from Impact on AEW and vice versa. I think it'd be more beneficial at this point, just for national television exposure alone, to have some AEW talent actually appear on Impact. I think that would honestly boost their numbers and try to boost their subscriptions to what channel is Impact on? Access, I think.
Yes, they are.
Access. Okay, so
they're on Access.
It's not TNT. You know,
it's not TNT, obviously.
But here's my follow-up question: is anyone on AEW really genuinely built up or a star enough to boost Impact's numbers?
I don't know if this is necessarily a move to build up Impact via using AEW talents, because
I agree.
They would be sending someone like Jon Moxley, who is probably the biggest star that AEW has, and he as the world champion there. I'm not sending Kenny Omega is interesting because he's the kind of guy who will fall 100% for this, like, because he's that kind of guy who has his ego that he is the big star of the company, and he would be the one to bring the success to AEW and Impact. I would be much more excited if the talent involved was not Kenny Omega. Let me put it to you that
way. I hear you on that. I do hear you on that. And I mean, they have been bringing Don Callis in. I mean, we saw him at Full Gear, so he's been a consistent presence. My concern is this.
And now that appearance at Full Gear makes a lot more sense, considering that they are now having him appear as basically Kenny Omega's manager / hype man.
Well, it has to have some sort of business dealings if then all of a sudden Kenny Omega is now able to suddenly show up on Impact. He's got to have some sort of legal representation that makes sure that he is allowed to do that. But this is also adding way too much continuity into Tony Khan's booking. And that's kind of the point I want to overall get with this. What are the chances that this is going to be anything long term? It can't be much.
I think what this does is it sets up the relationship for the possibility of doing talent trades. And I can't see this as a storyline thing, because why would they send AEW wrestlers to go to Impact? Because we've already established Impact does not have much of a reach. It's on Access, which most TV subscriptions do not get access. Now,
which is ironic just in its naming itself.
Yes. Now, if this is an attempt to try and make Impact bigger, I don't see the benefit for AEW.
I don't either.
Now, there is one thing that they could do, which is that Impact's roster is very, very small. They could have some of the underneath talent of AEW go to Impact and work there and get some experience, kind of like how New Japan does it with the Lion system and sending the wrestlers abroad.
Right. Well,
I mean, it's interesting, to say the least.
I will give.
It's interesting how they're going to take it.
I will give AEW credit.
With cautious optimism, going to watch.
I will give AEW credit, and I agree with you totally, because it's they've created immediately something different that you know, where it can go a lot of ways. I just don't trust the way this is going to be done unless Tony Khan's got nothing to do with it. Because I just don't see, like, did you hear his comments recently about Miro?
Yeah, I've heard that about him saying that WWE treated Miro like crap.
Well, give me a second, and I'm going to look up the actual quote here, because I want to read this quote. My face is going to get real bright because I'm using my laptop. Tony Khan.
Also consider that this is the same guy, Tony Khan, who was bragging about the rating numbers for AEW Dynamite versus NXT, which is great and all, except that it's just like, it feels kind of bushily.
Yeah.
To mention the other company by name, and to put the numbers side by side, like,
so
what does that do?
Yeah, it's so here. I'm just to give you an insight as to with Tony Khan. Now, for those of you who have not watched Miro, who is the former Rusev, what they have done is they've made him a video gaming best man with blonde hair who smiles a lot and wears pink $400 Minnie Mouse t-shirts. That's his gimmick. That's his gimmick. So I don't get it. It's just a guy. Being just a guy is not a gimmick. I'm sorry. Unless you were presenting this purely as athletic competition and not as these goofy, over-the-top, WWE-esque cartoonish characters. You know?
And even then, how is a guy who's a video gamer going to get over in a mainstream wrestling audience?
Well, they don't care about that. They've proven they don't care about getting new fans. They care about keeping their fans.
I suppose, and I guess Miro hits the target audience of video gamers who live in their mom's basements and watch wrestling.
Yeah, and honestly, right?
Wait, Sean, did I just insult you?
What?
By saying video game loving nerds who live in their mom's basement?
Well, I don't really feel insulted, because there's a statistically 53% of people my demographic and my age range live with their parents and just so happen to play video games. So, for those of you who think that your position,
I do not want to insult you, my man.
we need to normalize this particular instance. We need to normalize this, because this is the standard at this point. This is the standard. So maybe I shouldn't be so harsh on Miro, because he has blonde hair. I have like no hair, and I've got a hat. That's my gimmick, is a hat. Hello. So
well, the difference is that you didn't have to dye your hair.
Dye my hair what? White?
Blonde.
It already is, basically. It basically is. White, dirty. You can't tell with this with the camera so badly, folks, but it's in any event. Let's not continue berating my physical. Now I'm insulted, Sky. Now my physical appearance is coming to question.
my apologies, my man. I just wanted to make a joke. I didn't think you would take it that far.
Oh no, that is me. I will take things to the extreme. Unlike, okay. So I guess the overall point here that I want to make with this invasion thing is that I just don't trust Tony Khan and the brain trust behind AEW to do this right. And no offense to Don Callis either, but it's not like Impact has been doing great in that respect either. they've got some good points, and then they've got Who Shot Johnny Bravo with the court scenes. So they had Joey Ryan, Dick Flip Ken Shamrock. Just remember that happened, folks.
They had RVD and his girlfriend / stripper Katie Forbes show up and shake her ass, and that's her gimmick.
It was.
They just had a marriage end with a funeral because someone got killed in the middle of the wedding.
Yep.
And now they're doing a murder mystery.
It's a mess. So it's perfect for AEW and Impact to be collabing because they are practically the same show, just on different networks and with different talent pools.
And one is in America and one's in Canada.
But the same basic idea. So they're doing this, and my question is, where is Impact being taped from right now?
They have a studio. I don't remember where it is.
Because if it's based, because it can't be based out of Canada, I have to imagine, because that would be a nightmare. To
maybe, I mean, they used to tape in Orlando, so maybe they're doing it there.
I can't imagine they're still at the Impact Zone. That would be ridiculous. That would be ridiculous.
That's 2020, man.
But you know what? At this point, who thought that Omega the Kenny was going to be appearing at the Impact Zone? So it's who would have thought? Who would have thought? It's just a weird thing. I like the intrigue.
Needs to evolve.
I like the intrigue this presents, but I have zero faith in the parties involved to execute this at a level that is going to be satisfactory, at least to my standards. And that sounds,
exactly.
I know that comes off as super pretentious, but it's not going to be the pro wrestling style collaboration I want. It's going to be the let's all have a dinner party and sing along kind of dinner party. And then somebody gets shot and then stabbed with a hot soldering iron.
Speaking of dinner parties, did you know that dance performance from MJF and Chris Jericho won an award from the New York Times?
Yes, I did. I did hear that. Because that exasperated sigh is exactly my opinion as well. I still like MJF. I'm trying not to hold it against him, especially because if you saw his Instagram, he said that his grandfather really liked that, and his grandfather just passed away. So he hooked me in with the sad hook. And then he said, screw everybody. And it was, it was being a heel, but still was genuine. And now I got the feels, and now I can't feel bad about it. But I do feel, from a pro wrestling standpoint, it was so bad. I just can't. But it's.
I'm going to make another thing is that MJF using the tragedy to get you to feel sorry for him because that's what Jews do.
I wouldn't know, Sky. I'm going to take your word for it.
Well, my last name is Greenberg, and as you can tell, I'm a Jew. So
I'm gonna take your word on that, man. I fully believe that if I believe you're correct. But let's move right along. let's move on and get to different things. And you know what? Speaking of, there needs to be more Jewish tag teams in pro wrestling. Now that we're talking about it.
Well, there need to be more Jewish wrestlers in tag teams.
That would be nice. Yeah, you don't really see many of them. You don't.
Yes,
who do we got? I mean, we got Barry Horowitz. We've got Noam Dar. Is Drew Gulak?
We get MJF and Goldberg.
MJF, Goldberg. Is Drew Gulak?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'd have
to look it up. But
I know there's Colt Cabana.
And this is one day when
Another
I finally get the chance to rant on Goldberg. That's one of the reasons why I'm so disappointed in him.
Well, I don't know if those two things are related: his pro wrestling career and his Jewishness. But
and the answer is yes, it is.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to take your word on that. I have no frame of reference, but.
And yes, Drew Gulak is Jewish.
Hey, okay, so now that we have discovered all of these things and gone on this wonderful side rant, and we will have to do more of this going on, and we'll talk about Goldberg later. Not today, but later. Tag team wrestling then and now. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this show. So, what I wanted to kind of talk about is we've seen what tag team wrestling is now. And I want to talk about what your favorite aspects of tag team wrestling was when you started watching and what really captivated you in tag team wrestling as a fan.
So, when I started watching wrestling in the mid-2000s, what caught me on with tag team wrestling was the idea that you had individuals working together as a team.
Yes.
And the idea that you would synchronize together not just who you were as partners, but also who you were as a team. And I liked it when each tag team had a specific identity that told you everything you need to know about them and gave you a reason to either like them or hate them.
True.
Now, can I give you a modern-day tag team who I have fallen in love with and created one of the most captivating stories? And this, you're going to agree with me. I already know this.
Okay. I'm willing to hear it.
Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa.
DIY. Yes, I would agree with that. I honestly would agree with that. The good thing about DIY is that they were very well coached as well, because they had DX practically producing everything that they were doing, from Shawn Michaels and Triple H. Pretty much most of their tag team matches, they had a lot of influence in those. And then, of course, when they did their big main event feud, which I don't think we ever really got a proper conclusion to, sadly.
We never did, and it was just because of injury to Tommaso Ciampa.
I know, it's such a shame, but honestly, it might be for the better we didn't get it, because I think that it was kind of starting to overstay its welcome a little. Their matches were great. Their matches were all great.
The last chapter needed to be ripped, and it feels like we never got the last chapter.
I know, and they tried to seal it up well after the fact when Gargano did his thing and Ciampa came out and they had their resolution hug, I suppose. But those two, but their tag team matches with the Revival at the time, before they were FTR and doing AEW tag matches, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But those matches were great for modern matches that were not only just solidly airtight with moves, but also very psychologically sound. They knew when to slow the pace down. They knew when to build it up to get fans invested. The pitches, the fever pitches, the highs and lows, the structure of the match, how clean and crisp it was, the rules of tag matches, which is something that is sorely missing in modern pro wrestling tag teams today, is rules.
It feels like no one has any sort of respect or care for what you're supposed to do when you're in the ring and a referee tells you to do something or not do something.
Yep.
And it's industry-wide.
Yeah.
Because backslash tags,
yep,
staying in the ring for a long time to do tag team moves just for the sake of it. Blatant disregard of the official when doing moves.
Yes.
It's become crowd spots at wrestling shows to mock the referee during matches, which is annoying.
To me, it's just like, I always love, it's not even things, it's the little things for me. Like, I always appreciate the fact that with FTR or with old tag teams, and I'm going to get into, I mean, obviously this stopped being a thing in the mid 2000s and then got worse as the years went on. And actually, you could make an argument that in the 90s, it was kind of like, it was like this too. But if you watch any of the, I hate to do this because I'm the Cornette Mark, but the Midnight Express matches, or any of the Rock and Roll Express, or even the one we just watched for the match of the week, the Brainbusters and the Rockers, or the Hart Foundation, or anything like that. little things like grabbing the tag rope, cutting off the ring, the fever pitch, the heat spot, being in the right position. Honestly, I think the tag matches require a lot more sleights of hand. That makes it a little bit hard, and it's a little bit harder to do, I think, to have everybody pulling things off at the same time. And it's only been more complicated now that there's all these complicated moves that people do. But back, even when it was just punches, kicks, and body slams and and stuff like that, there was so much more.
Because of the fact that you have 4 people in the ring instead of 2, it's much harder to coordinate amongst 4 individuals than it is with 2.
Yeah,
that's why, in order to make tag teams work, you and your partner have to be on the same exact page.
Yep.
And know what you're doing. And when you do it, you do it. Whether you're the babyface or the heel, you always have to work together with your partner to make everything look good.
Yeah, and I've always loved the fact that we're going to go back to FTR. The reason that FTR was so good in the first place is that they were really adherent to getting the tags and making sure that the tags were hand-on-hand tags, and that back when people cared about that, where in order to tag somebody in, the referee had to be looking, you had to slap that motherfucker's hand, and then you got in the ring. There was no back slap on the back. There was no slap on the hand. There was one where I think somebody's hand like hit somebody's backside, like the tag partner's backside, like not like deliberately smacking the ass, but it was like on accident, and they would also counted as a tag. That was the one I saw at an indie show. That was real nice.
Sure.
But
I have a question for you, John.
Yeah.
This is going to relate to our conversation. Who are some of your favorite tag teams all time?
Oh, God. Favorite tag teams all time. Well, personally...
I'll throw out some of mine while you're thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
So obviously DIY, or a modern tag team.
Great.
I really love the Hart Foundation, because they were one of the first tag teams I started watching when I went back and watched old shows, and I loved how they worked together. Bret Hart was the tactician, and Bulldog was the powerhouse.
Yes.
As much as I'm not high on their ring work, but whenever the New Age Outlaws hit the ring, they could get the people in their hands just with the microphone.
Yeah, charisma through the roof.
Yep. Even going back to older tag teams like the Midnight Express, Magnum TA and Wrestling 2 when they were a tag team.
Fun. Honestly, I really enjoy what they do. I mean, 2 is so good, and it's amazing that, like, in the time in Mid-South, he was really in the twilight of his career. He was in his mid-50s by the time the 80s rolled around.
He honestly looks like he could have kept wrestling in the 90s.
Yeah, he was doing really well. I mean, you also got to remember that a lot of his gimmick and a lot of his moves did not require many bumps. You know, it was not this high octane style. You know, there was nothing really high octane about 2, and he did a drop kick or 2, but very rarely. I mean, his finisher was a knee lift.
Exactly, and that's another thing that I think is lost on wrestling nowadays is that we see all these high-impact, high-power moves, and we've become numb to them, so the wrestlers have to keep doing more and more and more, and it's shortening careers.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about guys who could wrestle into their 50s and 60s just fine, and we're talking about guys who are retiring not just in their 40s, but in their 30s, and some of them even in their 20s.
Yeah.
Like Paige, for example.
Yeah.
She had to retire really young.
Yeah.
Just as she was getting the prime of her career.
Well, in Paige's case, though, you have to remember that Paige had started wrestling and taking bumps when she was, 13? Not even. She was like maybe 9.
She was taking bumps when she was 12, which is all sorts of irresponsible.
Well, but then, you think about it, and then when WWE would actively mention that Paige at age 22 already had 10 years of experience. And when you think about that, by the time that she reached, what was she, 29 when she had to retire?
26.
26. So yeah, so 26. So she already had been wrestling for 14, 15 years, plus a myriad of other injuries. And then, of course, you're taking bumps as a child. So, it's I think we may have. Oh, there you are. Where'd you go? You disappeared.
Sorry, my boss texted me something.
So in any case, so
don't you just love getting text messages from work when you're not even at work?
Yes, all the time. And speaking of putting in work, I'm gonna give you a couple, and I know I'm gonna think of some, and I'm glad you thought of two, and and Magnum, because they really were fun to watch. I really, really cannot love the Road Warriors enough. I know that's like the basic bitches answer, because everyone's supposed to love the Road Warriors, and especially because like they just didn't sell for anybody ever all the time. But I loved their gimmick. I loved their promos. They were so fiery and impassionate, and they knew how to work a crowd so well. And they always both seemed to be good dudes. Save for Hawks, his own personal issues, but their in-ring work was always, even when they were green, they were still really energizing to watch. Of course, the buy rates of the Road Warriors too. I mean, you can't. I'm not saying buy rates go into why I like them, but still, you have to acknowledge the buy rates of the Road Warriors in their peak. I mean, won.
The buy rates proven that people love them and they wanted to see them.
And there is really the Road Warrior pop. That was the pop before Hogan ever really had the pop. And Hogan had his own pop, but the Road Warriors, they had a pop really unlike any other pop for the longest time too. And so I got to put the Road Warriors in. God, I'm trying to think of other really, because I came
Steiner
in.
Brothers.
See, when I said the Steiners, I was going to say the Steiners too. I would put them in as well, because they're really captivating too. I've really started enjoying the Heavenly Bodies. I hate to also once again be Cornette, to be the Cornette mark.
But that's the thing, is that era of tag team wrestling was arguably the best tag team wrestling era ever.
Well, of the more modern era, when you're not talking about Rocca and Perez and it's the territory days, because there's definitely a long.
Honestly, Sean, I would still argue that it's the best era of tag team wrestling.
Well, it could be. I think you may very well have a point there, and it's interesting.
Like the late 70s, early 80s was the height for name brand tag team wrestling and tag teams who could main event pay-per-view cards without the need of a singles champion. I mean, yes, obviously there were singles champions who were still big stars during that time, but you could get by with tag team main events, especially with the National Wrestling Alliance and their tag title matches.
Oh yeah, well, because they were held in the same amount of reverence. It was just the same. It was a different division. It didn't nearly, the lines weren't nearly as blurred as they are now. And I think that was a part of it too. Because they wanted the tag teams to feel as important, because they knew they could sell just as well as a main event for a heavyweight title. And that kind of gets me to another tag team that I honestly wish that we had been able to see more of them, and I know this is going to be a weird one to put on this list. I would have liked to have seen a longer run from Owen Hart and Yokozuna. Because both of them could work. Yoko could work. He was great in the ring. He did a lot of agile stuff. His weight got the better of him. I think that was really what his issue was, and that's what led to that not really ending up being more than anything. But Owen had just been coming off one of the hottest feuds he had with him and Brett, with whole 94 coming in with 95. Yoko, he had been kind of teetering down a little bit, but if Yoko had been able to stay at least somewhat healthy, or at least in the same condition he had been in 92, 93, Owen and Yoko, when they won the titles, I loved their dynamic. They both had a reason to associate with each other. It was one of those thrown together tag teams that I think ended up becoming really, solid together, and it just never really materialized. And it kind of leads me to my next favorite, which is the Bar.
The Bar are a throwback to what post-modern tag teams have not been, and that is stiff as hell guys who work hard and will bruise you, but they're not dangerous in any sort of way.
Not dangerous. Well, they're dangerous and imposing as far as what they're trying to make and put into your mind, and as far as what the kind of attitude they are. But they're not going to hurt the people they work with.
What I mean by that is that they're stiff and hardworking without being an injury hazard.
Right. Right. Well, presumably. I mean,
Well, once Cesaro decides not to fly outside of the ring and land on his head anymore.
Yeah. But they, I mean, honestly, their run in WWE, every time that they had a match, they were always airtight. I was always refreshed to see the Bar. And I wish they hadn't been in so many multi-team matches, because that just totally gums things up more than you need to. I wish they would just do proper 2-on-2 more. Just that. More. And they don't.
Right. Like, even... And to throw in more modern tag teams, the New Day and the Usos, both of them.
Yeah.
Were tremendous workers. And not just tremendous workers, but tremendous chemistry and charisma.
Well, the New Day have come a very long way in the 6 to 7 years that they've been around. The
Usos have been together for 9 years. Actually, well, if we believe it by them, it's been since birth.
Right. But it's one thing with the Usos, because the Usos, well, then again, they were presented as very white meat baby face that nobody really cared about. It wasn't until they went all Uso penitentiary on everything that their draft stock, I think, improved significantly.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, they went from white meat baby faces to white meat baby faces with face paint to a couple of guys who were just tough as hell nails, who were rough, will beat you up, and be happy to tell you about how they beat you up.
This just further affirms the overall point, and there is so many examples from The Rock to Roman Reigns that Samoans gotta turn heel. Why does WWE not get this lesson? They have had 6 different people they could have to get this through their heads, and every time they make this mistake, and they put them as white meat baby faces that everybody hates, only to turn them heel, and then they end up great. So,
wait, hold on. What if they're doing it on purpose?
I was gonna say maybe they do know what they're doing, and I'm just complaining for the sake of complaining, but still.
We have to hate them because they were likable at first,
yes.
And then we've got to like them as they were being jerks so much that they became faces again. Unreal. But in any case, only in wrestling.
Only in wrestling. And it's funny because I'm trying to go through Attitude Era tag teams, and I do want to add. Well, I do want to add the world's greatest tag team, and again, I wish we had seen more of them in WWE.
Agreed, and they have the potential to be a really, really great tag team, and they just kind of got wasted in an era when tag team wrestling didn't matter.
Well, in their defense, they do have some New Japan matches and some Ring of Honor matches that they have done plenty of. So there is more world's greatest tag team around. I remember one of my favorite tag matches of the Attitude Era was a ladder match between the world's greatest tag team and Eddie Guerrero and Tajiri.
Talk about a weird tag team.
Well, Chavo got injured, so Eddie needed a tag partner. He chose Tajiri, and Eddie and Tajiri won it.
But the number of tag teams that you could list off are just amazing. The Guerreros, Chavo and Eddie, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Brothers, the Dudley Brothers.
Yeah, all three.
And
if we shifted this from favorite teams to just the best teams, there are a myriad of good tag teams. But I feel like now, with the way that, I don't think we're ever really going to get another proper tag team like that again. For the sake of how pro wrestling tag team matches are laid out at this point.
I'm not sold on that. Like, I think we are in a dry spell with tag team wrestling for at least the next couple of years, but I think you can still potentially make money with tag teams because the New Day have proven that being a tag team will make money for you if you book them correctly and work with them together correctly. It just needs to be circumstances and the right guys at the right place at the right time.
Oh yeah, which is how most stars are made. You know, I think that, and then there's the Street Profits, but we'll skip right on from them.
The Street Profits, they have the potential, but it's just too green.
To them that they're too green. To them, they're ruined for me by WWE's overproduced presentation. It's like I'd like a lot more tag teams if they weren't overproduced and overpresented, and that's WWE in general. But also, you know, AEW is just as guilty of that, and that's what leads me to the modern style and modern era tag teams and where it was before and the subtleties that you were able to do. You've lost because now tag team matches are, instead of 4 guys working a match where you're trying. It's more of now a who cares about the rules, who cares about anything other than our gymnastics, because we got to get our gymnastics in and our big moves that now have no meaning. And then there's really so much more room for tag team matches to deteriorate and make them, and to not, you know, where the rules just start being thrown out the window. That happens a lot more with tag matches than it does with singles matches, because it's a lot easier to do because 4 people and it's pandemonium. And it's really, to me, hurting what tag team wrestling was and was supposed to be, because this just gymnastics show to me is not what tag team wrestling is about.
I think the problem is that more than anything else, video games have ruined tag team wrestling.
Yeah.
Because when you were in video games and you played them in like the mid-2000s, early 10s, you were able to do the TLC matches without any sort of feeling.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's not you that's taking the bumps.
Right.
And you're just doing all this crazy stuff. And all these kids who were growing up with video games like that grew up to like that kind of stuff, and they're just like, okay, let's try and do this in real life. But the problem is that you can't do it in real life because people are not video game characters. You can't copy it.
Well, tell that to Kenny Omega, the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion, Sky, who translates video games to real life into his art.
And for every single Kenny Omega that exists, there's that guy who broke his legs trying to do a backflip off the ropes.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, with tag teams, I know what's sad is that there are now a generation that this style, this video game style, has been around for so long that now people are being taught that is the standard. And that's really what's horrifying to me, because now some kid is going to look at people like, I do this every time. I don't mean to do it every time. But people like the goddamn Bucks, and they're going to be looking at them and go, I used to watch you when I was a kid. You're my hero, which I'm not trying to take the piss out of the Young Bucks, but the style, that means that their style is, instead of getting the subtleties that made tag team wrestling great, instead we're going to get twice as much nonsense gymnastic BS from the next generation of wrestlers coming through, which is why I feel like with the way that tag team wrestling is going, there will be names in tag teams. Don't get me wrong, but there will be no good, real, true tag teams anymore in the way that they, in my view, were perfected.
There's just going to be 2 people working together to try and win a match and get titles. They're not going to have any sort of character and identity that identifies them as a tag team. You're just going to have 2 guys who are lifelong friends or 2 enemies thrown together but they're not going to have any sort of common shared identity, any sort of thing that would make you want to like them or root for them, other than the physical moves that they do in their matches.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but a character, a wrestler who is based on the moves he can do, unless you can do like a 10-20 off the top rope, I'm sorry, but I ain't gonna root for you.
Well, it's a real simple concept. People don't care about moves. People care about people. And if you don't have any personality to get people invested in you, it doesn't matter what moves you do.
Actually, Sean, let me correct you. They care about the moves in the moments. The problem is that once the moment passes, they're not going to care about you anymore.
Yeah, because it's like, can you name me from this? Pluck from me 6 spots out of a match out of the Dolph Ziggler and the Miz match from 2018 or 2016.
Which one?
Exactly. So see, this is the problem we have. It's mayhem. Ladies and gentlemen, it is chaos, and it is advertising spots that are available to you. If you need your product to be presented to at least 15 people, you at most, as it stands, I think 225. I don't remember our latest highest number, but it is a number that bears some level of significance. If you want some advertising space to reach a small to medium-sized number of people, you can get that space. All you need to do is contact us. Hit us with those great DMs. I am on Twitter at CM Podcast. Hit me up, slide into that DMs. We will work with you. We will present your product at this moment, right in this spot right here. You see, this is like a drawer, and we pull out the drawer, and we got a little filing cabinet. We pull out a little teeny tiny manila folder, and we open up that little teeny tiny manila folder and pull out that sheet of paper, and that little sheet of paper would have your name on it, your logo on it, your phone number, your email, your Facebook, anything that you want to put on, we can make put on for you right here. Please join the Court Martial Podcast advertising space today and get your product elevated to colonial levels.
And then may I do my advertisement?
What's that?
May I do my advertisement?
Oh, yes, I forgot. Now it's Skyler's turn. Skyler, your advertisement, Skyler is the first man who has actually come through with this. So, Sky...
Oh, no. It's an joke thing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming up on the end of December, and you all know what that means. Atlantic Coast Pro Wrestling and National Wrestling League will have our final shows for the year 2020. Atlantic Coast Pro Wrestling's Winter Warcraft.
Yes, sir.
And National Wrestling League's Frozen Frontier.
It's going to be cold winter.
And my friends, what is the main event of Winter Warcraft?
The main event of Winter Warcraft, for those of you who are looking for it, is Jeff Cobb, the Hawaiian Lion, with Jim Cornette as his manager. After Jim Cornette has promised that the cult of Cornette is stronger than any one man, and that Brian Cage's days of World Heavyweight Championship title wearing are numbered. It is Brian Cage, Jeff Cobb, the Clash of the Titans at the one and only Winter Warcraft. It is going to be a barn burner, and I'm excited to book it, although I hate to book it because I've seen the flaws of booking myself into a corner, but see how I escape it, whether it's good or bad, come 2 weeks from now at ACPW versus NWL. And as far as NWL, what is the main event of your Frozen Frontier?
Well, the NWL World Heavyweight Champion, Drew McIntyre, has defeated every man that has stepped up to him, including all 3 members of the Dad Shield. And now, he will defend his championship against the one, the only, the prize fighter, Kevin Owens, who has come to the National Wrestling League with one thing on his mind, and that is the World Heavyweight Championship.
Kevin Owens.
These 2 men are going to go at it for the richest prize that the National Wrestling League has to offer. and who knows what's going to happen.
Kevin Owens has been on fire lately, has been winning match after match after match, has been putting people in the hospital, putting people out of the company. He's been throwing people left and right. It has been a train, a non-stop train with a one-way track, and that track is for the NWL Heavyweight Championship and Drew McIntyre. It is going to be a barn burner. That is going to be a terrific time. And now, it is time to finish our show with another tribute. And this one, I personally think we got to talk about both sides of this one. At 79 years old, Pat Patterson has passed away. Let's talk about the good first. He was an expert wrestler in Rio de Janeiro. So much so that he won himself the very first WWF Intercontinental Championship. He wrestled many a good match. I honestly realized once again, as we sit here doing the umpteenth one of these wrestler tributes this year, that once again, I have not seen many Pat Patterson matches. Unfortunately, the only one I really distinctly remember is that damn evening gown match with Gerald Briscoe, which
is it possible to find a Pat Patterson match on the internet?
Well, it's funny you say that, Sky, because if you look in the description of this exact video, you will find a match of the week set for next Tuesday, the 8th of December, and it is, in fact, a Pat Patterson match.
But who is he fighting against?
Pat Patterson will be fighting. Give me 1 second, because I do not, because there were a couple, and I forget which one I chose. Hold on here just a minute, and I will.
Hopefully, it's a good opponent that is worthy of Pat Patterson.
It is.
The first ever WWF Intercontinental Champion.
It is, and I was intrigued by it, and I can't. It is from 1979. It is North American champion, a very young Ted DiBiase.
Ted DiBiase Sr.?
Ted DiBiase.
Interesting.
Sr. 1979. Patterson and DiBiase North American Heavyweight Championship. Real interesting. It's going to be an interesting one. It's a 12-minute match. We'll see how it goes. But in any case, Pat, so we're going to get to see how he really works. But Pat, he was obviously good enough and had a track record enough of being a great mind for the business, and knew what stories made sense. He got it. He got pro wrestling, and I think that his career very much exemplified that. Unfortunately, I feel a little bit more in the dark than I should have, and hopefully, and on Tuesday we will be able to clarify a little bit more about Pat as far as what his career entailed. But as far as I know, it was really pretty much Canada in the same kind of league and area that Dino Bravo was from, although in a different district, obviously, and then he came to the United States and started working. I'm pretty sure that he pretty much stayed solely in the WWF.
He's one of those guys who was he was a WWF lifer.
Yeah.
By the fact that he worked up until his death.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he even spread around the territories. We're going to have to do some more Patterson actual in-ring career research, but he had a great career. And even more than that, his post-in-ring career of really helping and culturing talent and bringing and being one of WWE's producers pretty much through the entirety of its success from start to finish. Somebody who was very widely beloved by many, many, many people for his influence on the business and his influence on many up-and-comers throughout the years.
This is one of those situations where, tragically, most of his career happened before most of us were born, and before people were recording TV and wrestling. So it's one of those things where you have to listen to the mouth of word. That's why I'm so happy that we actually have a match that we'll be able to watch next week.
Yeah.
But honestly, Pat Patterson is one of those guys who, more than his wrestling, was acknowledged for being one of the best minds in the business, as evidenced by the fact that he was a booker for Vince McMahon. And if you know Vince McMahon, only one man has been allowed to book wrestling matches for him, and that's Pat Patterson.
Yep.
And his influence on wrestling is clear as day because he was the one who was behind a lot of the magic that made the Ruthless Aggression era, the Attitude era, even the era before, the Golden era, I guess if you call it that.
Well, they had the New Generation, which New Generation. I don't know if you want to take credit for the New Generation, but he was there.
I'm not taking credit for that.
He was there, but but the Clique was not Pat Patterson's fault.
He's one of the guys who pushed Psycho Sid.
Yeah, but the Clique is not Pat Patterson's fault. That's really what that boils down to.
Yeah,
But anyway.
Anyways, so Pat Patterson, more than his wrestling, what he's acknowledged for is his influence on training and teaching wrestlers the ultimate stuff when it comes to the mind of the wrestling business. And that's a rare thing nowadays, where you don't have minds of the business sharing their knowledge and telling people how you can improve.
Yeah, and Pat, I think Pat's legacy is going to go to, well, we'll talk about Pat's legacy in a second, but the positive side of Pat's legacy is probably going to go down very similarly to Dusty's, I think, in the way that he has really transcended generation after generation of wrestlers and talent, and his fingerprints are really global, widespread in the world of pro wrestling, at least the world of American pro wrestling, as we know it. Because any of the match, I'm sure there are plenty of matches we could go back and say who agented this, who produced this, and I'm sure that Pat's name would come up more than once. He's
no doubt.
You know, I wouldn't call him a stooge, but he was one of the guys. I mean, he was one of the Stooges, which was fun. Also, props to Gerald and Pat for that. I mean, at their older age, and they were in their 50s. They were out doing that kind of stuff. They always found a way. Pat always found a way to remain entertaining and remain liked. And then,
with the good, you have to mix in the bad.
Well, and that's just it. It's like I debated wanting to talk about this, but I think it needs to be said. I think that there's probably more skeletons in Pat's closet than we probably want to know. As far as
I have to agree with you on that.
As far as what we're referring to specifically is the Roddy Piper incident. And Roddy, without so much as saying so, has basically claimed that Pat did things to him when Roddy was a real young kid, just really into the business. He had been wrestling since 15, but when he was really, really in it, and there's a really, really hard to watch interview with Roddy Piper. I want to say it was a Sean Oliver kayfabe commentaries one, where he talks about Pat. I can't even describe how Roddy looks. I can't describe it. It's like, but he was saying
the word is devastated.
Yeah, I'm not one to infer or judge, but I definitely know, at least from Roddy's body language and the kind of things he was saying, I believe 100% whatever happened to Roddy. And I'm not saying that Pat wasn't a great guy to a lot of people, but I think that there was a time in a different time in wrestling, when certain things, whether you were, I mean, there's no justification for it, but whether it was a different time in wrestling, and I'm not trying to use that as an excuse, it was just a different time in wrestling where those things were a lot more swept under the rug and were not brought to attention. Hence why the Dark Side of the Ring series on Vice even exists in the first place.
I mean, this is one of those things that makes it hard because it's not talked about a lot.
No.
And incidents like him and the Jimmy Snuka stuff, which, given the circumstances of that situation, you probably know that Pat Patterson knew at least something.
Yeah.
Considering how tight he was with Vince McMahon.
Yeah. And you know, and I'm sure that Vince, well, and not for nothing, Vince has had his own set of those types of rumors and accusations, particularly in the Shawn Michaels department. So who knows? Who knows? But the real interesting thing to me with this is I don't know whether you've seen the episode of Legends House, Sky, where, or even the clip where Patterson came out. And it's a touching moment, and there's like there's 8 people in the room. 6 people are super supportive of Pat, and then there's Roddy Piper. And watch Roddy Piper. He looks disgusted. And then when Piper later on, during the, after that coming out part, and they interview Roddy cannot look at the camera. And he said, I was happy for him, but you tell that was a lie. You could tell it was a lie. And it was just, something went down. I'm not here to say what. I'm not here to accuse anybody of anything. But it is not out of the realm of possibility to think that with a man of that kind of power, to ensure that kind of power, that even the greatest of us would abuse such power. I'm not saying that, I'm not justifying it, okay? I want that to be clear. In no way am I justifying it. If it happened, which I personally think it did, but if it happened.
It's a stain on what would otherwise be a near perfect career, but this is a reminder that even your heroes are not always great people.
Yeah. And it's something that has to be mentioned. It's something we don't want to mention, but it has to be mentioned that this was something that was, a rider. And really, it was a lot more prominent, I thought, as far as the conversation pieces about it. It was a lot more prevalent, even in like the mid 2000s into the 2010s. People were talking about it a lot more. And really, by the time that Roddy died, pretty much everybody just forgot.
I don't think they forgot. It's just
or just chose to ignore it
under the rug, and it was hidden from people. It was basically, let's not talk about this anymore because he's a legend of the business and stuff like that. Which it's marmy.
It's marmy. Yeah, it's a whole lot of gray area, and I'm not one to speak on gray area, but in any case, either way, rest in peace, Pat. I've got nothing but respect for you for your career and your influence on the business from that position alone. Who you were as a person, I'm not one to say.
R.I.P. to Pat Patterson, one of the legends of the wrestling business. And please, for the love of God, let's not do another tribute next week.
Yeah, come on. Can we stop these, please? Everybody live. Everybody live. I know that's a tall order, but we only got 3 weeks. Everybody live.
Exactly. Make it to January, and then we can start doing these again next year.
That's right. So hopefully next week, I will have my laptop back. So hopefully you will see me on this live stream, and then the next episode of the Court Martial Podcast will be back where it belongs. Fingers crossed. Got an exciting show in line for you next week. We got the Pat Patterson match on Tuesday. Skyler, thanks for hopping on as always.
Thank you for having me, my man. I look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks for NWL versus ACPW.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a hell of a ride.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great time, but right now it is time to take our first commercial break. When we get back, we got a great live stream match of the week for you and more. Stay tuned, and we will be right back after these messages.